Trusted is actually a travel nurse company that places travel nurses in 50 states, but we also have a wealth of resources from our blog to our community forum, as well as mental health resources and things like that. This event is super near and dear to my heart. I was a burnt out nurse working in the COVID ICU, like many of you guys are, the med surg floors and, everything in working in the pandemic right now. I completely totally feel you, and this is for you guys, okay? Just a couple of housekeeping things. I did pin the message at the top just to let everybody know in case you forget, but we are recording this event. It's recorded so you guys can have these resources and also just refer back to the slides and the information at a later date. And then it's also for those of us who can't attend, especially, working 7P and stuff like that, or even if you're on today, I totally get it. There is a Q&A section, so if you guys will toggle to that, you guys can just shoot questions there throughout the presentation, and I'll float those to Meg at various points. So don't feel like we're going to forget or anything like that. We got you covered, as well as the DMs. If you guys need to DM me anything, if your audio isn't working, if your visual isn't working or anything like that, I will be happy to help you guys because I want to make sure you guys get all of this information, okay? And if neither of those things work, there's also a help button at the top. It's the little question mark. So if you guys are just still having issues or anything like that, you guys just let me know or press the help button, okay? So without further ado, I will hand it over to Meg, our gracious host.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I am so grateful that you're here. As you can tell, this is the Black Nurse's Guide to Burnout, and I will be getting started. And I really want to make this an opportunity and a space where, if you do have questions, like Britt mentioned, please float them in the Q&A. If you have something burning that you want to ask, we're leaving some space at the end to answer them. I will do my best to try and answer every single question. I am really excited to do this presentation, as it is near and dear to my heart. I'm not a nurse, but I have definitely experienced burnout. And I'll talk a little bit more about me and my background in a minute. But if everyone is ready to get started, then I'm just going to begin. Okay. Britt, if you have any issues, if my audio or video goes off, just let me know. Okay. So my name is Meghan Watson. I am a registered psychotherapist. I am based in Toronto, Canada, and this is the Black Nurse's Guide to Burnout. I am the founder of Bloom Psychology and Wellness, a clinic here in the Toronto, Ontario area that focuses primarily on meeting the needs of the BIPOC and the LGBTQIA community here. My practice, my private practice, is really a space for me to meet the needs of BIPOC individuals, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and their mental health struggles, whether that is related to racialized stressors or whether that's related to life transitions, relationships, work, body image. I have a background in eating disorders, complex mood and anxiety, and I've worked in pretty much every single level of care, from inpatient mental health to aftercare groups and now private practice. Part of my work is really focusing on education and support in understanding emotions and managing stress. And right now I work closely with organizations and companies like Trusted Health and many others in developing really holistic and thoughtful mental health projects with this intersectional perspective. And so one of the things that I talk about a lot is understanding burnout, figuring out how to cope with burnout, making sure that we have the tools to navigate it, and then learning how that we can take care of ourselves to avoid, re-traumatizing ourselves, kind of falling into burnout into the future. So I'm going to talk about a lot. I think what's really important for me to share is that as a therapist in private practice, The thing that I think about a lot is the emotional burden of stewardship, and in particular, trauma stewardship. When you're a professional, a health professional, as many of you know, it is really challenging to both deal with the concerns that your patients and your clients and the individuals that you see on a daily basis are dealing with, as well as figure out how to manage your own stuff. And that's a bit of a double bind and a double jeopardy that is unique to those in the helping professions, and about making sure that people understand that. I tend to see mostly Black women professionals, so nurses, respiratory therapists, pretty much accountants, professionals. And so at this space in my career, I've had the luxury and the pleasure to be able to guide many individuals through a journey of burnout, and I'm hopeful that this is helpful for you too. So we're going to start with a mindfulness exercise. And if you're not familiar with mindfulness, you don't really have to do anything. I just want you to take a seat, try and be in the moment. Think about accepting yourself here. Treat yourself the way you would a good friend. Focus on my words, focus on the breathing, and remind yourself that when you're done caring for others, that it's important to remember caring for yourself too. So get comfortable, rest your hands and feet in a comfortable position, and just take a deep cleansing breath. Shake it out, loosen your shoulders. If it feels right, close your eyes. And we're just going to spend a couple minutes here getting ourselves in a space where we can start to begin to unpack, unburden, and learn how to be in the moment. So much of what we do as helping professionals is step out of the moment, step out of our bodies, step out of what we need, and attend to the needs of others. So, try and see if you can take this moment just for yourself. Okay. Take a few moments and get in touch with the natural movement of your breath. Not trying to change it in any way, not trying to shape it, just the sensations of your body as it is in this moment. As you do that, bring your attention to where you feel your breath in your body. Maybe it's in your chest. Maybe you feel your back opening. Maybe you notice your belly, like ocean waves, the tide rolling in and out. Your breath will also be there. As best as you can, bring an attitude of allowing and acceptance to the breath. Again, not trying to change it, just existing. Doing what feels natural. What feels safe. Your mind may wander or drift. Know that that's normal. Our thoughts and our feelings are meant to flit from one place to another. Maybe you're daydreaming, planning, thinking about what happened today. Just allow your mind to be. If you become aware of any tension or any physical sensations, try to gently name it for yourself and direct your breath to that area. Breathing in, imagining yourself taking in some bright light, sending it to that tense area of your body. And breathing out, sending it out through your fingertips and toes. As you ground yourself into this moment, take a few seconds to remind yourself of the intention you're bringing to today's session. Many of you have experienced burnout and trauma and overwhelm in many different ways, but all of it will be unique to you. Take a moment to consider why you need this today. What matters about taking the space just for you? Thoughts and feelings will come and go. Your breath will remain in this moment. Your intention will stay in this moment. You are the observer of your experience and the experiencer. You are the place and space for this moment. If it feels right, put a hand on heart. Express some gratitude and appreciation for whatever you could handle in this mindfulness today. Maybe you got enough or some or none of it at all, but just express some appreciation and some compassion for whatever you're bringing to the table today. Take 2 more deep last breaths in, holding at the top of the breath and out. Last one in, hold, and out. Stretch. Shake your fingers and toes, wiggle it out. Okay. It is the first time you're coming back into your body, you're finding a little bit of space for yourself. Congratulations, you made it. We are rolling right along. I hope you can take that with you into the presentation. And so let's get started. Okay. So, what is burnout? Burnout essentially is a syndrome that comes up when we have these chronic, ongoing, very layered stressors, physically, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. And some of the main characteristics of burnout that you might notice are energy depletion, increased sense of like mental distance from your job, cynicism, negativity related to work or general activities. Burnout isn't just related to work. Burnout can spill over into our personal lives. So you may just not care about doing anything at all. And then another core piece is this reduced professional and personal efficacy. And by efficacy, I mean our ability to feel like we can do things. And so when we think about burnout, we really want to think about the idea that we are losing energy, we are feeling disconnected, we are disinterested in the things that we felt like we were interested in before, and we just don't feel like we can do anything. Everything feels effortful. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what burnout might be looking like for you. And so some of the things that I really want to highlight at the top is that as a Black nurse, you may be experiencing not just the trauma and the stressors and the burnouts of seeing patients, whether you're on the ward, whether you're, walking through the halls and you're having to deal with people vying for your time and your energy and asking you questions constantly, or your supervisors might be expecting and demanding more of you every minute, every hour, every day. You actually have to deal with the psychological impact of racism, discrimination, and prejudice in the workplace. And I'm not saying anything that you and I don't both already know, but I think it's meaningful to assert it here. When you have microaggressions and macroaggressions in the workplace coming from all sides, from the people that you're treating, from your colleagues, from your supervisors, from management, from leadership, perhaps if you're working within the hospital, the institution itself might be rooted in racist ideology. It can really put a heavy burden on the work that you do and ultimately impacts your burnout. And so I think it's really important to also think about the kind of work that you do. So nursing, not everyone who is a nurse is on a shift work schedule and has a demanding schedule, but many do. And so when you are changing the way that your body circadian rhythms naturally unfold, you actually interfere with our natural ways of engaging in the stress cycle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about like the physical and the emotional and the mental pieces of burnout later, but it's really meaningful to remind yourself that although you might be used to this part of the job, it does affect us, and it affects us greatly. You might have difficulty accessing the necessary equipment and the tools that you need to do your job appropriately. You know, this was a huge piece of the pandemic. You didn't have access to PPE. Maybe you didn't have access to beds. You didn't have access to medications that you needed. And so doing your job, it's not just that you don't feel efficacious. You might actually just not have the tools to do that. And that's incredibly frustrating when you show up to work and you really want to be able to be tasked and given the tools to be your best self and to really do what you need to do to save lives and to show up for your patients every day. And again, there is large nurse to patient ratios. Not everyone is going to be like this. I have some labor and delivery nurses that, you know, there's like more of us than there are women in the hospital. I mean, maybe that was in the winter time. I think there's just a lot of babies in the hospital right now, per my experience, my clients. But at the time, they were feeling like, well, you know, we're not really seeing as many people. But then I have nurses who are in cardiac rounds, who are in med surg, and they are just inundated with patients every day, every minute. And so I think wherever you are in your journey, whether you're in the management side, whether you're, you know, on a bedside, it's important to think about like there's less of you than there are needed, and the demand is incredibly high. And when that ratio is imbalanced, it puts a strain on every individual working within that system. Again, you know, travel nurses, from my perspective, working with my clients, again, I would love to hear thoughts here, are often placed in very challenging, difficult, and acute, intense hospital settings. It's often the places that are very hard to fill. It is often due to burnout in the profession. There are a lot of people who are leaving nursing, who are deciding to leave the profession or to change roles or to change scope of their work because of burnout. And when you are in a travel nurse position and you're moving from contract to contract, or you're traveling from place to place, you might be put in places where people would have left. There might have been a mass exodus from that place in the hospital. And so as a Black nurse, you're dealing with this very significant sense of eeriness of why did everyone go and why am I here? And so that can be incredibly challenging to deal with, because that's not just work stress, that's interpersonal stress. Again, nursing positions are increasingly more difficult to fill because of this burnout. Everything feels more effortful. There is a loss of ease with work. And to put the icing on the cake, you're still having everyday losses. You are seeing predominantly, potentially people in your community, Black communities predominantly impacted by COVID-19. Maybe you're seeing a lot of people that look like your family members and your friends in the hospital passing away. You know, maybe you're noticing that you're struggling through a breakup and your pet just died and your kid's trying to go to school and you can't figure out how to get food in the morning or to get to work on time. You know, these are all things that are going to impact you. And then you turn on the news and you see that police officers, law enforcement are killing us in high numbers. You may notice that the rate of Black women, for example, with master's and PhD education is rising, and yet they're the most disrespected individuals in the country. It is disheartening, and it puts a strain, an emotional and mental strain on you that ultimately is going to lead to incredible burnout. and overwhelm. Okay, so again, there is a desensitization to grief and death. There's only so many things, so many times that you can watch someone really struggle and not be impacted by it. You may start to feel numb. You may start to feel like there really isn't any sort of compassion, or there's any sort of energy to be able to deal with both the double jeopardy of doing your job and dealing with vicarious trauma and dealing with racism and addressing microaggressions and making sure that your activities of daily living are met. It is incredibly hard. On top of that, there's probably very little or little to no spaces to talk openly and safely about the impact of race, discrimination, and prejudice. I want you to think about whether you've had any time in your professional career to get a safe space to really talk about what's been bothering you, what's been meaningful for you. And when you don't have that opportunity, you don't have community. And if you're looking around your colleagues and you don't see any other individuals who look like you, who experience the world like you, that's also going to add to your burnout. Again, last but certainly not least, Black nurses face considerable stereotype threat in the workplace. And what I mean by stereotype threat is it's a social psychology term that describes the type of interpersonal stress and threat that you face when people categorize you in stereotypical ways. For example, being the strong Black woman, being the resilient one, being the mother, the one that everyone can lean on, the supporter. So-and-so is going to be there. She's always the one that we can lean on. Black women are generally the people who fall into those roles, not because we step up to the plate and say like, hey, me, like I want all this work. It's because of systemic racism and discrimination that puts us in a place where we are seen as able to handle more pain. We are seen to handle more emotional and physical strain, and ultimately there's a belief that we can withstand this increased load and the brutality of that as a result. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the link between vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue and actual trauma in the workplace. But I wanted to get started with just kind of talking a little bit about this because it's really, really important for us to think about when it comes to burnout. Okay, so burnout impacts three main areas of mental health. And if there's anything I want you to take from this, I want you to take that burnout really deals with both physical, cognitive, and emotional effects. You're going to have the body holding the weight of your burnout and your trauma in high proportions. Now, think about this. You are at work and you realize that your boss is the source of your stress and your burnout. They keep pushing extra patients on you. They, switch up your roles. They change the way that you work on a whim. And you notice that there's one person in particular who's really pushing the limit for you in terms of what you can do, your energy and your capacity. When you get home, the threat, your boss, is not there, but the stress is. And when you're not able to close that stress cycle, you're not able to teach your body and your mind that you are safe, even when your boss isn't physically there, you actually stay in that chronic activation state, which can lead to some significantly negative effects for you. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Cognitively, when you're faced with burnout, you're at home, using the same example of your boss, you're thinking intrusive thoughts about, well, I wish I could say this to them. You're reliving the situation with your partner. You're calling your friend saying, I can't believe this happened. And listen to this. And I don't know how to deal with this. Maybe you're breaking down. Your mind is full and foggy. This is stressful. And so your mind is actually going to be laden with all of these intrusive thoughts and these overwhelming spirals that are going to make it really hard for you to think, much less even make decisions or to do anything meaningful outside of work. And then emotionally, right? As you're thinking all these things and your body is feeling burnt out and tired and fatigued, You're moody, you're confused, you're overwhelmed. It degrades your emotional resiliency and destabilizes any sort of regulation of your emotions that you might have had. I had a client today that made made the very astute statement. She was like, I don't want to be resilient anymore. I'm tired. I don't want to be resilient. I never want anybody to think of me as resilient for a single moment. She had had a ridiculously hard day at the hospital. And at the end of the day, she stepped into our virtual session and she completely broke down. She couldn't figure out why she was feeling the way she was feeling. She didn't know how to explain why she was feeling that way. Her emotions just were bubbling up and overwhelming her, so much so that she felt so much shame just telling me. And it really took a while for her body to start to realize that she's in a safe place and that I'm not going to invite her. I'm not going to be racist towards her. I'm not going to do anything that's going to, push her to the limits. I want her to be her perfect self just as she is. And even though you might be around family and friends that love you, even though you might be in a session with your therapist, your body does not lie. And burnout has that horrible, horrible quality of lingering, even when you feel like everything else in your life is going well. Now, that doesn't necessarily always happen, but when you feel that shame and you're living in that shame narrative of I'm not good enough, I'm not good at my job, I'm not a good parent, I'm not a good mom, I'm a bad partner, I feel like I can't, talk to my friends, I don't have any time to go out, like all I want to do is sleep. It is so horrifying to look at yourself in the mirror and see a shell of the person that you used to be. And so you are absolutely not alone in this. And I hope that, in the next couple of slides, that you probably do relate, but also don't relate to what I'm going to share, because I'm going to go into a lot more details about what this actually looks like for you. Now, physically, if you are taking a look, just take a look at these points that I have here on the slide. There's fatigue, there's sluggish, vegetative, withdrawal, isolating from others, difficulty maintaining self-care activities of daily living. Can't tell you how much, the nurses on my caseload are so ashamed of the fact that they haven't been able to shower. They haven't been able to brush their teeth. They don't know how to eat anymore. They don't know how to get out of bed. They feel just so absolutely lost in their bodies. And this is all normal. It is absolutely normal when you're burnt out. It's one of the things that leads to this idea of this like detached, disoriented way of being. You may have decreased or increased appetite. You may be binging. You might eat a lot more than you plan to. You might be eating a lot less than you plan to. I think it's important to think about, when you are engaging in this cycle where you might be coming home from work and not even being able to make a meal, and all you're doing is just kind of binging on foods, to have some compassion for yourself. I think a lot of times people are disgusted with who they are and they feel incapable of doing anything other than shaming themselves or kind of letting that inner critic kind of rise up and take over. And when that happens, I think a lot of people will push themselves even further. Well, I got to go to the gym. Well, I just need to get my shit together. Well, I just need to figure out how to use my planner and do this and do that. And sometimes it's not about what the world can do to fix itself. It's about what you can do to heal you. And so I think it's really, really important to see if you are identifying any of these things physically for yourself, and start to really note it. If you have a notebook with you, jot some things down. What do you relate to? And it's important to do this because burnout creates this like dizzy, detached, disoriented sense of mind where the things that you might feel like you're experiencing last week, you have no recollection, no memory. What happened? I don't know. And I can tell you, there was a point in my career where I was working in a inpatient eating disorder ward, and I had patients being mean and abusive and racist. And I get it, you guys are hungry and upset and struggling with mental health disorders, but I'm a human being. I'm going into my supervisor's office and I'm sobbing. I'm just crying. I'm bringing Visine to work, dropping it in my eye, just hoping for the best. And it just beats at you and beats at you and beats at you. You know, if I wasn't writing in my journal at that time, I couldn't tell you a single thing today about what was happening. I couldn't tell you a single thing. And it's really important to think about, like, okay, let's write some of this stuff down. Let's see if we can jot it down and just keep a memory, because your mind isn't functioning in the way that you would hope or want. And so just being compassionate and allowing yourself the space to say, you know, I'm really resonating with this. And so I'm going to remember this. Okay. Cognitively, again, about this, but take a look at these slides. You know, you might be vigilant to feeling like you're a failure. You know, maybe you are a new nurse and you're struggling with some procedures. You might feel like, you know, you're constantly worried about whether you're going to do it right, whether or not someone's looking at you, whether you're going to fail, whether the doctor's going to yell at you again, whether you're going to choose the right tool if you're surgically assisting, whether you're doing anything right at all. This is incredibly common. You might have difficulty staying present with loved ones. You know, when you're overwhelmed and you're working back to back and you're working nights and then you're working mornings and then you're waking up and you just can't remember what day it is today. And you start to think, when's the last time I actually had a conversation with my partner? When's the last time I asked my kid what was going on at school? When's the last time I checked in with myself? Now, this is huge because that creates a space where you're just living life like a zombie. And that sense of detachment, that sense of being present, it's kind of like the Charlie Brown noise. Like when the adults are talking, it's like womp, womp, womp. Like you can't hear anything. Like people could be saying things to you. You might ask them a question and you can't even listen to the answer. Totally normal. When you are burnt out, this is what's happening to you in your mind and your body. Okay. Forgetfulness, excessive worry, intrusive thoughts, trouble concentrating. You know, if you're relating to this, you're definitely not alone. Okay. Emotionally. So I think these are the ones that I notice that the nurses that I see struggle with and don't realize that it is a sign of burnout. They may snap that they normally may not snap at. They have a short fuse. They're irritable and tense. They may feel worthless. You know, there's nervousness around situations that you normally feel ease with. You might actually feel numb. You know, you don't feel anything at all. You might be just experiencing chronic rage and frustration. It will strain your relationships. It will get you confused onto what you care about. You know, you don't even know what matters to you anymore. Having mood swings. You're feeling overstimulated all the time. You just don't believe that you're valuable in any way. And these things are highly correlated with other mental health concerns like anxiety, depression, OCD. And so if you do have other diagnosed mental health concerns, or you are, you know, worried about like your emotion dysregulation, know that, you know, these are both experiences that can happen at the same time. You can be burnt out and you can have anxiety. You can be in a major depressive episode and you can be, you know, really feeling burnt out. And so, you know, it's meaningful to see if you can piece away some of these symptoms for yourself and try to understand them. Okay. So burnout has many faces, and it's not just the ones that I've shared before. It's decreased motivation. You know, you probably lose motivation to care and attend to the emotional and physical needs of your patients. You know, there might be no time to meet your own needs. When's the last time you took a bathroom break when you had to go to the bathroom? When's the last time that you took the full half hour for your lunch or your dinner? When did you get outside for the last time? When's the last time you were able to just drop your shoulders and loosen that space between your neck and your ears? Your needs are just completely brushed aside constantly when you're burnt out. Again, you may feel like very depersonalized from the work. This is very terrifying for a lot of nurses. And again, I'm going to talk about compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma later on, but you might start to actually be unfeeling and impersonal. It causes intense shame and guilt about, whether or not you're a good enough nurse, whether or not you are cut out for this work. You may feel like, you have to leave the profession and isolate yourself so that you're not hurting others, that you're not destroying relationships. It's very difficult to manage all of this. And I think, knowing that burnout kind of keeps you in a space where you feel like you're not good at your job, you don't have the passion anymore, and you're just disassociating from, the things that you normally would feel excited and passionate about, are huge. Again, you might really be dissatisfied with yourself. Something that I see as an eating disorder therapist is a lot of connection between food and relationship to food and the body and burnout. And I think a lot of people might think that they might not be related, but as you are, starting to become very dissatisfied with who you are and what you feel, you may need to start to think about, well, am I existing? What can I control? And I can control my eating. I can control how I look. I can control all these different things. And when your body is kind of degrading, like maybe you're breaking out, you're feeling a little heavy and bloated and disassociated and overwhelmed, you're not living in the body that feels like your own. And so a lot of the times it feels alien to you to exist in your body. You might feel very dissatisfied with yourself, and you feel really incompetent. Again, you might avoid people and other colleagues, dread responsibilities. Everything is a burden. Even the small, administrative tasks that would be easy, burden. Someone asks you a question, you know the answer to, burden. At home, and you're dealing with kids and partners and pets, burden. It's stressful. Everything is a burden. And so when you're starting to feel like the world is just effortful and you can't seem to get one foot in front of the other, consider that you might actually be lockstep in burnout. And then something that I really didn't realize until I had experienced this myself is decision fatigue. So struggling with making any sort of decision in your life, big or small. If you are wearing scrubs, you might not even know which one to put on. You might not know, what to eat for breakfast. You might not know which route to take to work. You might not know how to do anything and make any small decision. Much more difficult decisions are, when someone's coding, you might start to feel completely blank. You don't know what to do next. People are snapping in your face, kind of telling you like, hey, let's go, let's go, let's go. And you just can't seem to figure out what to do next. That's a key sign of burnout. And again, I'm mentioning shame a lot, but a lot of burnout is associated with this shame and this guilt, because things that feel easy to accomplish usually are just everyday hard. And when you're exhausted and you're apathetic and you just don't know what you want, you don't know how to prioritize your needs, you don't know how to identify your value, or even know what you need, if someone's like, well, can I help you? And you can't even answer that question, that is so stressful, because how are you going to get any help if you don't even know what you need? You don't know how to make a decision about what to do next. So, okay, let's take a pause here. I think it's meaningful to think about, what does burnout look like for you? Have you been relating to any of the things I've shared in the past, 20 minutes? Like, what signs are telling you that you're burned out? What do you notice? Are you having strained relationships? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling tense? If you have a notebook and you kind of want to jot down some of the journal prompts that I'll have on the slides as we go through, feel free to do that. Access to this with the recording, as well as resources at the end. But, take a moment to just kind of think about, like, what am I feeling? As I'm hearing this, as I'm thinking about this, as I'm reflecting on what burnout is, where is it resonating for me, and where do I relate? Okay. All right. So I love this quote. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. We are told that as health professionals that we must sacrifice in order to be good at our jobs. But I think it's important to realize that if you don't put the oxygen mask on first, who's going to do it? Who is going to do it? And you have to be the one to step up. I think it's really hard to take accountability for your own burnout because we are helpless, we are tired, we're overwhelmed. But you are not alone. And it's important to sit in a community like this, to share with each other, to write in the comments, talk, see, listen, learn, and start to think about, how can I actually build in some community that can relate to me? Maybe they don't ask me anything other than let me vent, and that's okay. Okay. So we're moving into the second part of this, which is essentially the trauma. And burnout is worsened by experiences of trauma. And I do not want to minimize this at all. I cannot talk about burnout in Black communities without talking about trauma. We are traumatized to the gills. We can't look anywhere without seeing another person who is dying, someone who is disrespected, devalued, invalidated, dismissed. We have seen it in ourselves. We have seen it in our loved ones. We have seen it in strangers. We see it in our kids. And we get it from all sides. And so I'm going to talk about a few different pieces of trauma that show up a lot in health professionals, and especially Black professionals. And they are intergenerational trauma, it is racial trauma, vicarious trauma, and then PTSD, which is like the direct witnessing and ongoing experiences of traumatic events and work. This is going to look different for each and every one of you who are listening here today. And so if you see yourself in these pieces, think about what it might be like to reach out to a health professional. If you can get access to therapy, or if you can join a support group, or if you can kind of start thinking about what it might be like to re-engage with more mental health support, please do, because these are very serious and significant pieces of our traumatic response. And as you'll see later on in the slide, they're really, really linked with the work that we do as health professionals. Okay, so intergenerational trauma. Ultimately, we describe this as cumulative, so kind of layered, ongoing, emotional and psychological wounding over the lifespan and across generations, resulting from significant and major traumatic experiences and events. And so epigenetics tells us that there is some evidence that trauma can be passed down to future generations through changes in our gene markers, but most commonly I see that being translated in our habits, the secrets we keep, the places that we, see ourselves in, the world that we believe that we can participate in. These are all pieces of intergenerational trauma. And I don't know about anybody who's on this call, but I come from a long line of service workers. I am a psychotherapist, but both of my parents are physicians. My grandmother is a nurse. My aunt is a lawyer and a nurse in a previous life. And my grandma was a midwife and a nurse in the early 30s. My mom's a pediatrician and my father's a trauma surgeon. And every day I grew up feeling incredibly privileged to be in a family and in a community of people who were constantly serving, who were always being seen as like wonderful and amazing. And I grew up in the Caribbean, so in Barbados is a very small community. Everyone's kind of talking to each other, and the health community is widely. But as I started to do my own work and I started to unpack my own trauma, I realized that there were generations of embedded beliefs about labor, about how I should spend my time, about what I needed to do to be successful, to be seen, to feel accepted, that were parts of my intergenerational trauma. And so maybe there are pieces of your family history too that are relatable here. You know, maybe your family might not be in the health profession, but they're in the service industry. Maybe they're constantly doing things for other people. You know, maybe there are pieces to this puzzle that are hidden or subconscious or unseen. Start to think about like what it might be like for you to unpack, you know, what happened in your family that is creating this sense of feeling invaluable and constantly needing to deny your own needs to attend to others. Okay. So again, there are lots of different thoughts here. Self-care is selfish. You need to work twice as hard to get half as far. There's the long-standing impact of forced labor, slavery, and exploitation that maybe has never been dealt with or challenged. You know, there's a prioritization of survival and hustle mindsets. Always keep going, never stop, don't think to feel, don't burden other people with your issues. You know, when have you seen people in your family rest or heal or really take time for themselves, right? I love this quote by Audre Lorde: caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. I think a lot of people think that this quote just is about self-care, but it's actually from her last piece of work before she died, the Cancer Journals, A Burst of Light. And it's in the context of realizing that such a prolific and a beautiful poet, writer, speaker, you know, Black, lesbian, queer woman who showed up for her community with the written word. And she was dying. She was struggling with the idea that she had spent her entire life doing things for other people, you know, unburdening her own trauma, holding space, and she had never taken the time to do so for herself before her life was ending. And I thought that was just such a tragic piece to the end of her life. And it's a quote that is wildly misunderstood as just, oh, well, we need to do self-care. It's actually much deeper, and it's rooted in disability narratives around Black women, around queerness, around, you know, learning to love ourselves and become one with our identity. And so, you know, think about the times in your life where you were embedded in trauma and you don't even know anything else other than trauma. I know that growing up, I didn't hear a single thing in the kitchen table, in the living room, that wasn't about trauma, that wasn't about someone's ear being cut off, or some baby in the NICU that didn't make it, or, you know, someone who was struggling and the phone is ringing off the hook. And I see that for myself now, constantly trying to give and give and give and give and give. And when you don't have anything left, what to do? And we teach other people, we teach our family members, we teach our friends to behave that way when it comes to our stress and our burnout. And so if there's one thing you can take from this intergenerational piece, is that we can end this cycle. It's one thing to deal with the physical and the emotional and the mental pieces of burnout. It's another thing to teach ourselves the belief systems that have been embedded for years and years and years about what is valuable about ourselves, our minds, and our bodies, unless we are working, unless we are productive, unless we are giving. Okay. So, moving right along, racial trauma. This one is particularly relevant, especially in 2020 and 2021. I mean, for every Black person, it's not a surprise that racial trauma was a thing. I mean, I think it seems that all of the white counterparts around the world seem to wake up to racial trauma last year, when many of us have been living this life and living through you know, race-based traumatic stress for many, many years, especially when it comes to dealing with patients who are disrespectful, who are rude, and have no interest in creating space for us or respecting the value of us as human beings, not just as bodies that are supposed to attend to them. And so I think The American Psychological Association says that although it is similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, racial trauma is unique in that it involves this kind of ongoing individual and collective injury due to exposure and constant re-exposure to race-based stress. Again, a journal prompt here for you. What boundaries do you need to set with others around preserving your peace? Sometimes the most beautiful thing we can do when it comes to racial trauma is realizing that it's not our job to educate the masses, and it is not our job to deal with the challenges of, navigating race-based traumatic stress. Our only job is to heal. And it hurts and it's painful when we see other people not stepping up to the plate, particularly our white counterparts. But there comes a time where you get to that intersection, that crossroads, and you have to make a tough decision. Okay, so some points here on race-based traumatic stress, detachment when reminded or triggered by racial violence. When we see George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and those videos are circulating and somehow we're supposed to just pick up and keep going. Those are awful, awful triggers that keep us feeling like, well, how can I continue? How can I be here right now when this is what's happening to my community, to the people that look like me, who live in the world like me? Low self-worth, avoidance and hypervigilance to avoid discrimination and prejudice. I've had clients say, I can't work at this hospital because I saw the manager and I saw everybody else and they're white, so I've got to go. And, they may leave their dream position or their dream post because they just can't deal with the stress of people being racist and prejudicial and discriminatory towards them, and good for them. But other people, other individuals who don't identify as Black don't have to make those sacrifices between feeling valued as a human or your career or your life. And so this is an incredible burden and can lead to significant burnout over time when unaddressed. Some affirmations here written for you guys, and some journal prompts. Really affirming that you are allowed to feel anger. Your life is valuable. You are in many ways the manifestation of your ancestors' hopes and dreams. That it is your birthright. It is your right to be excellent and abundant. That you are more than your job and are valuable beyond what you do for others. And again, this quote by Alice Walker, I really love. You don't always have to be doing something. You can just be. And that's plenty. Okay. Compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout. Complementary and yet different from one another. So I think compassion fatigue is one of the things that I see in nurses the most, and common features here for this cost of caring is this increased jaded feeling, cynicism, loss of enjoyment of your career, no passion for things that you love, apathy, desensitization, numbing, detached, impersonal bedside manner. And it's an occupational hazard, and almost anyone who cares about their patients will develop a certain amount of it over time, varying in different degrees. Close to 1/5 of nurses here in Canada report that their mental health has made their workload incredibly difficult. They just don't have the they don't have the energy and the space to be kind. And it's scary. It is terrifying, especially if you came into this profession with a sense of purpose and passion to help and to be there for someone. And, when nurses report on the job violence, when they report that they have to take time off work, leave of absence, that they're dealing with people who are unkind, who are aggressive, who are mean, and who might literally spit in your face on a daily basis while expecting you to show up for them and to treat them and to save their lives, it can make you into someone that really just does not care. And it is absolutely okay to feel that way. It is human to feel that way. You are not a robot. You are not supposed to just get over it. You are not just supposed to move forward. And so high levels of burnout are associated with compassion fatigue. And it's not just nurses, it's everyone from child protection workers, social workers, therapists, counselors, respiratory therapists, orderlies, like everyone from the top to the bottom is going to experience this if at any point they care about their patients. And it's insidious, right? It attacks the very core of what brought you into this work, which is your empathy and your compassion and your capability to help and to heal. Okay, so vicarious trauma. This is also pretty significant. It's also known, you might have seen it, as secondary trauma. So it's regular, intense, close contact with people who have experienced major trauma. And so nurses are on the front lines of this. You are doing the triaging. You are talking to the patients. You're getting, oftentimes histories. You are learning about the patients before the doctors can even get into the room. And you're learning about, all of these major traumatic incidents that might have brought them into the hospital, because they are just hurting. If you are encountering people who struggle with sexual violence, with infertility, with loss, with grief, with major traumatic car accidents, with cardiac arrest, with strokes, you might be seeing things in your own family that have traumatized you, and then have to walk into work and see it right in your face. That is traumatizing. And it creates this sense of like, I cannot trust that the world is safe anymore. I no longer believe that the world in which I live in or the life that I lead can be trusted to be safe for me or for anyone that I love. And it is incredibly painful to think about what it's like to constantly have to encounter this on a daily basis. And, it's important to really just stay firm within yourself and know that you're not wrong for feeling this way. You're normal for feeling this way. Here are some symptoms of it. Again, intrusive imagery, thoughts about patient stories. People are saying, don't take the work home. But if you're noticing that you're reliving a lot of situations, you're telling your partner or your friends, like, I can't believe I saw this today, or, I feel so bad for this person. This is vicarious trauma. And this is how it shows up very, very, very silently, very painfully. And again, fundamentally altered negative beliefs about the world. In mental health, for therapists, we have supervisors and people we can consult with to deal with the traumatic nature of our work. But from what I understand, nurses don't have that opportunity. They don't have the space to maybe go to their supervisor and talk about how painful it is that they've seen, yet another person lose a baby when they're in their own IVF process. They don't know how or where to talk about, how do I talk about, seeing this young girl who lost her father the same age that I did? How do I, see this woman who is completely distraught by being paralyzed and can no longer live the life that she wants to lead anymore? And I'm just in survivor's guilt about getting up every day. And so having the space to be able to process that is integral to closing that stress cycle and allowing yourself to heal. And when you have vicarious trauma, you need people in your corner to say, you are not crazy. You're not weird. You're not abnormal for thinking about this time and time again. You actually need to talk about it. And I'm here without judgment to listen and to learn and to be open to what you're feeling. Okay, and so last but certainly not least, there's PTSD. So this is a mental health disorder that is characterized by direct experiences or witnessing of traumatic events. This can be repeated or in isolation. The pandemic is a clear example of of something that could be ongoing and chronic that could create post-traumatic stress disorder. And again, like, this is really characterized by this belief that the world is fundamentally altered, not being able to keep work at work, not being able to compartmentalize anymore. Everything is spilling over. Maybe you're crying in places that you normally wouldn't. Maybe you're overwhelmed and you're tired. You have all these trauma-related thoughts. You're triggered. Sounds, noises can overstimulate you. You're getting flashbacks to moments of time where you were maybe treating someone. You're dissociating. You're losing your sense of self. If you're in the ER and you're in first responder mode, you may not even be present enough in your body to realize that you are in a reenactment of a trauma response. And so realizing when you are in a reenactment and you're just living through that trauma over and over and over again, I think one of the main things that I see in nurses is that they will purposefully re-engage with the traumatic events. They will actually sign up for more shifts at work. They will actually, talk about it more. They will try to make sense of the trauma by trying to explain it, trying to piece it together. But actually what that creates is a re-experiencing of the event. And when you are experiencing that personally in your life or professionally, you can start to disintegrate from the inside out. And so if you notice that you can't stop reading about traumatic events, you can't get rid of the doom scroll at work, you're crying uncontrollably, you're having these overly negative thoughts, you may even feel suicidal or stressed, know that there is help out there for you. There is support, because when you're dealing with burnout and you're layering on all of these traumatic experiences, whether they're vicarious experiences, you're seeing other people who've experienced them, or whether you're seeing them yourself. In the course of the same shift, you might see someone who has experienced a major traumatic event and be deeply impacted by it. You may be unfeeling and uncaring. You might have had someone be discriminatory towards you, and it's kind of holding in the back of your head. You may have a doctor who just says, okay, we'll just do this one thing, and that puts you over the edge. You might have a supervisor that's pushing another patient, or puts you on med surge, or does anything that just gets you to a place where you just can't cope and you break down. And there's often a breakdown moment, whether it's in the bathroom, whether it's snapping at a colleague, whether it's at home with your family, that short fuse. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You've got to give yourself back some space, some time, some healing to re-find a safe space for yourself first. Okay, so I kind of talked a little bit about the symptoms, so I won't spend too much on this slide, but here are some of the things that you might notice if you are experiencing PTSD. Okay, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. I had a supervisor tell me that once, and I don't think I could even laugh at that. I was in a place where I think I might have glared at her. I was like, can't believe you're telling me this right now, but okay, thanks. And I brushed it off, but I never forgot it. So I'm sharing it with you too. Maybe you can share it with someone who you think needs it. Maybe you save it for a rainy day. But here we are. We're in the last stretch here. How do we cope? How do we actually deal with all this? Megan, you've shared all of these horrific things that we've been experiencing, and now what do we do? Here's the answer. Okay. Prevention is key. Just being here in this talk where you get to see about burnout and see these symptoms and think about what to do is meaningful. If you know that burnout is going to happen and it's a huge part of the work that you do, then preparing for your burnout ahead of time by thinking about what skills might be meaningful for you is valuable. There is no way that you lose out by preparing or trying to prevent burnout before it happens. Before you get to that empty gas tank, see if you can try to fill yourself up when you're halfway. I even try to say to clients, you should be filling yourself up at 80%. You should be filling yourself up at 75%. Let's not wait till we get to 30% or 10% to start engaging in some meaningful coping skills. Try to address this head on before you can even get to that place where you're feeling empty and exhausted. So some of the coping skills, and I'll talk about some of them more here, is engaging in affirmations. This is something easy that you can take with you. Like, I am worthy, I matter, I need space for rest. Repeating that to yourself, hearing that, having it on your phone background, making sure that if you have it on a journal or if you have it, on the back of your, oh my gosh, the word is failing me here. I used to have like a little sticker on the back of my like tag on my lanyard that said like, I matter, I'm worthy. And I think I rubbed that sticker so much that like all the glitter came off. I felt like it was one thing that was just grounding me. Like I would look at the back of it, I'd like tug the little stretchy elastic and I would look at it. I would be in the bathroom being like, you can get through another shift. Allowing yourself that space to just center into something that feels right. Taking a mental health day, a step further, leaving your job. Leaving the job. I know that I talked about how compassion fatigue can lead you to, getting out of the profession. But I think for a lot of people, it might be necessary to actually take a break from nursing. And that is controversial, but it is necessary. You matter way more than your job. Your health, your safety in your life matters way more. And if you know that if you're showing up to work and it is the one thing that is impacting, that's the threat, that's the stressor that can't seem to leave you, then think about what it might actually be like to step away from work. Whether that's a leave of absence, whether that is actually leaving the profession, trying to do something new, or what have you. But thinking about taking a mental health day at the very minimum would be meaningful for you here. I left my inpatient hospital job where I was working with veterans and law enforcement and people with substance and behavioral addictions and complex mood and anxiety and eating disorders. And I stepped into private practice and immediately my life became better. And I wish that I could say that it was less easy than that, but it actually was. It was incredibly, incredibly beneficial for my mental health to take a step back. And I sometimes wonder why I didn't do it earlier. And a lot of the times it was guilt. I like many other people in the helping profession, feel like it is our duty to stay and to hold down the fort and to sacrifice and to constantly give and give and give. But it is not worth it. Your health is not worth it. Black men and women are at higher rates of chronic health disease. You are experiencing not just race-based traumatic stress, but general stress and anxiety, overwhelm. There's the intergenerational trauma. There's the added burden and just trauma of dealing and being a human being in 2021 right now. If you need a break, take it. Use an emotional first aid kit. I will talk about this in a minute. Disconnecting from using social media, getting support from people you trust. Trust is the key word here. Do not trust your story with just anyone. Make sure that you have boundaries with yourself and others about who you share your shame with, who you share your story with. Not everybody is safe. And I think a lot of people will just say carte blanche, you should be asking for help, talk to your supervisor, talk to management, maybe they can help. As a Black woman, that is bullshit. I'm not gonna pretend for any of you. And you have to be careful about who you share your story with because not everybody is safe and not everybody is looking out for you. And that creates a sense of constant vigilance. But you can feel calm and knowing when you take time to look at who's actually in your circle, who stands up for you, who is really thinking about your best interest at heart? Is it profit over personhood? Is it, what you can do for them, or whether or not you're going to support them? Not everyone has your best interest, and so be very mindful of where you share your story, because I think I had a therapist tell me that I shouldn't be so vigilant, and that it was my vicarious trauma. And I knew in that moment that she totally did not understand what it meant to be a Black person in North America. She had no idea what it was like to not trust that there are people who were going to take advantage of us, that were going to use us, that were going to exploit us and going to use our labor until we were bone dry. And that was the day that I got a new therapist. And so it isn't just our white counterparts. I've experienced this laterally from other individuals who are people of color. It's important to realize that not everyone is safe. And so come up with your own strategy, maybe your own kind of feedback for, how do I know that someone is safe for me? How do I know that this person is meaningful? And to not give up. If you're looking at the people around you and you can't find someone, that doesn't mean that there's not space for you. That actually means that you have to keep looking and to have faith that there are people out there that understand. Okay. So I wanted to have this brief moment on rest here. I know that we're coming to time, but it's important to think about rest as more than just sleeping and, slowing down. There's physical rest, there's creative rest, there's spiritual, emotional, mental, sensory rest. And so, looking at how can you access pleasure, joy, and liberation if you are too tired to experience it? The world is saying everything is abundant. Go catch that opportunity, be an entrepreneur, do your best, be your best self. And all we want to do is turn down the volume of life and step away. And so thinking about what kind of rest you actually need, what kinds of rest your tank tends to go down with more so than others is really important. For me, my social rest battery is absolutely the one that goes first. I spend my whole day talking. I spend my whole day supporting other people and lifting them up and affirming them and giving them space. And I just don't have any time to talk to a friend at the end of the day. Maybe on a weekend, I might book something, but I'm not going to book, a full schedule of things to do after work or after a long shift, or because my social rest battery is always the one that comes down first. But when it comes to, for example, mental rest and sensory rest, these are all things that take a little less time for me. My brain tends to be more anxious, right, than it is slow. So my brain is usually running, even though my body might be completely fatigued and bone dead tired. And so take a moment to just jot down, what kind of rest you relate to most, and what kind of spaces you need to be in order to make sure that all the different types of rest that are meaning for you are met, that those needs are filled up to the cup. Okay, again, thinking of rest in a few new ways. It makes room for more of what we want in life. Try not to compare your rest to others. If you're feeling uninspired, then rest allows for creativity, right? Giving yourself space to rest means also having time to process and reflect. Okay, so I'll have more about this in the resources, but I think it's really important to think about having an emotional first aid kit. It's one thing to talk about coping, but it's another thing to actually have tools with you. And sometimes an emotional first aid kit can literally be something you keep, like a pouch in your handbag or in your bag at work, where you have a few things. And so I want to talk about soothing your body, soothing your mind, and soothing your heart. And so allowing your body to have access to things. So for your body, think about your five senses: smell, taste, touch, sight, and hearing. In my first aid kit, I have Sour Patch Kids, I have a stress ball, I have a tea bag, I have like, $5 or a $10 bill for like getting coffee, like when I'm at work or if I'm not at home, really making sure that that part of my body is always attended to. I'm never feeling like at the end of the day, if I'm tapped out and I have 15 minutes that I don't have anything. I know for many people who work in hospital systems, you can't use aromatherapy. You can't, scents are very, very sensitive. You can't even use scented lotion at times. And so if you can use scents, then using scents are a great way to ground yourself. Maybe a little bit of lavender under the nose or eucalyptus. But a way around that is like baked goods. I would do this a lot if I was working late. I would go down to the vending machine and I would get like a soft cookie and I would pop it in the microwave and I would literally tell everyone, like, if you touch this cookie, I am going to destroy you, because this is the only thing that I need right now, and it's meeting all of my needs. It's meeting all of my sensory needs. It smells great, it's soft, the texture is good, and so just giving yourself the grace and space to have something even as simple as a cookie. So there's some questions here, like, what does your body crave? Is there a comfort food you can bring with you? Is there a list of stretches you can keep to remind you of what to do? Focusing your mind. Okay, so, I've waxed on about the frazzle and the chaos and the near impossible shut off that you might be able to have. But having this 1 to 2 reminders in your back pocket to help still your mind can be meaningful. Music is a great one, a prayer, maybe doing what we did at the beginning, a meditation, a mantra. If it helps, you can download a mental health app on your phone. I'm a consultant over at Alchemy Health, which is a mental health platform for the culture. There's like Produced Waves, which are like meditation apps that are really meaningful and are more like R&B and like beats focused than perhaps like the soft yoga noise that a lot of people might see in their meditation apps. There's Shine app, which is 100% for Black individuals, and they have these meditations. And so making sure that your emotional first aid kit doesn't actually have to be physical. It can be on your phone. It can be something to just a playlist that you've created, letting your mind be soothed. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about like PRNs. If you have considerable anxiety and you have a medication or an anxiolytic or something that you use to decrease panic, that should be in your first aid kit. You should have your medications, you should have your vitamins, you should have things with you that make you feel centered and regulated. I don't know what it is about like having your vitamins every day or like having a chewable vitamin C or making sure that you get your vitamin D in the winter that makes me feel like I have my stuff together. But if that is something that you relate to, then have that with you, because that's a quick way to boost your mood, to say, I'm taking care of myself in more ways than just bubble baths and self-care. I'm actually taking care of myself by nourishing myself, by taking my medications, by making sure I have my therapist number on hand, et cetera, et cetera. And last, take note of your heart, right? Feel your feelings. Have a journal on hand. Have a quote that you love. Think about who you can safely share with. I've talked about this earlier, so I won't spend too much more time on it, but nostalgic photos, phone numbers, memories, these are all things that can help. If you have Instagram, create a collection of saved photos that make you feel soothed and spiritually safe, all helpful. Okay, and I think it's also meaningful to have just like quick things to deal with your parasympathetic nervous system. Again, use your 5 senses, try paced breathing, stimulate your vagus nerve and your parasympathetic nervous system by breathing out longer than your in breath. If you can't do 4-8, try to do 3-6. So breathing in for 3, exhaling for 6. And if you can't do 3-6, try 2-4 or 1-2. Whatever is accessible to you is meaningful. Stay rooted. You can rock. You can dig your heels into the floor. Remind yourself that you're connected to the ground. Again, make note of your physical sensations. Limit your self-judgment. Validate yourself. Get more sleep when you can. Fuel your body. Attend to those ADLs. They're important. Move your body, gentle stretching, taking a quick walk, some jumping jacks, like getting your blood pumping can actually close the stress cycle and remind your body that you're actually in a safe place to do some gentle movement. Connect with community, and then create a ritual of joy. We have so many routines and rituals around productivity and optimization, but having traditions and rituals focus on just joy and personal satisfaction are meaningful. Like, for example, it could be as easy as like every night I'm on night shift, I have my like 9 o'clock snack, and I sit on the couch in the like in the staff room, and I just close my eyes and listen to music, and that is my thing. That could be just as much of a joy ritual as anything else. Okay, I've said this before, but do not forget your ADLs. Take showers when you can. Wash your hair, even if it takes 5 hours. If you don't have time to do the whole detangle kit and caboodle, if you have natural hair like me, like who has the time? See if you can get braids in, like make your life easier. Don't make life harder for yourself. Just co-wash, wet your hair, scrub your scalp, do whatever you need to do. You know, brush your teeth, keep a toothbrush on hand if you need it. And then, you know, clarify your values and non-negotiables. You know, if you do have some time, think about like what you care about. Is it community, acceptance, integrity, compassion? If you know what matters to you, then it is going to be much easier for you to be able to set limits about what you will and will not accept. Because if you know that time is absolutely valuable to you, then taking up extra shifts is not in your future. It is not. Even if you feel guilty, even if you feel like you have to, you should not be doing that, because you need to remember that if you value your time, if you value that, and if you value the space for creativity and expression, you've got to give yourself the commitment to set a non-negotiable around protecting that value first and foremost. Okay. Some final thoughts. Know what you can and cannot control. There's only so much that we can do. You know, we can't change our managers when they're invalidating and racist and mean. We may not even be able to choose the patients that we have to work with, especially when they say they don't want to work with a Black person. They only want to work with a white person, or they don't like the look of us, or they don't trust us. Know what you can and cannot control. Let the world make some decisions for you. Don't push yourself to make changes when you don't have the emotional energy to do so. If everyone wants to decide what to do, let them. Let the world go. You will be okay. Not everything is urgent. Assess your energy regularly. Is your tank empty? You know, do you need to spend some time on yourself? It's not just physical labor and mental labor, but it's emotional labor. If you are dealing with a lot of burnout at work, maybe don't sign up for that community thing, or sign up to run the bridal shower for your friend, or to plan an intricate birthday party for a loved one. That is emotional labor that is unnecessary and not needed when you are tired and exhausted and overwhelmed. Again, make sure that you have Black spaces, maintain boundaries, don't isolate yourself, and be with loved ones. Social connection can be such a powerful tool for closing the burnout stress cycle and giving you the sense to say, you know what, my friend is right, my girlfriend's right, my partner is right, my mentor is right. I've got to prioritize myself. And so even in the tough situations, allow yourself to see the good in you. Okay, and lastly, a moment of self-compassion can change your entire day. A string of such moments can change the course of your life. And so I will leave you with that today. It is a quote that I love. You can share it, you can hold it, maybe you can write it somewhere if it touches you. But be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself. There is a lot going on in this world, and it's not easy being a nurse right now. And so being self-compassionate in moments, time and time again, can really change your life. Okay, we are at the end. We can make some space for questions. I know I was like 5 minutes over, 10 minutes over, but I had a lot that needed to get through, and I hope that it was helpful and meaningful to all those who were present today.
We appreciate you, Meghan. If you guys want to just throw any questions in the chat, that would be great. And if you don't have any questions or anything like that, I do want to say before you guys head out, though, two things I'm going to ask you guys favors on is, can you please fill out the event survey that will be sent out? It just helps us get better at these events and really, really cater to you all. I also just wanted to let you know that I see you, I hear you, and I support you 1,000%. And I would also like to ask you on that event survey, if you could fill out your address. We would love to send you guys a journal for attending today, just to help support your own self-care. Okay, guys? So please, please, please do those little things for me. And also thank you so much for attending. I don't see any questions, so we just ultimately want to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight.
No problem. I'm going to send you the deck because I've got like therapy directories that will be linked here, IG accounts to follow, additional resources and
We got all the goodies.
books. We've got all of that. And then I have like a resource page that I've created with a little checklist that you can create your emotional first aid kit, some affirmations, some journal prompts, and some tips to just kind of ground yourself. And so if you can print it or put it anywhere, or even if you just stick it somewhere and you just remember it maybe one time when you're feeling burnt out, just be kind to yourself. And thank you so much for participating and being here. I am so, so grateful to be amongst such wonderful individuals. And I think if there are no questions, then you can always reach me via my email or get in touch with me on Instagram, send me a DM, and let's chat.
All right, guys. You guys have a great night, and I'll be in touch with the email and everything for all the resources, okay? Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.